Great, got it. Sorry about that. So welcome everyone, and thanks for making time out of your busy day to take part in our 10th SWAP Learning Series. I'm very excited about the topic today. We're going to hear from colleagues at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Well, I wanted to just introduce the speakers quickly, and then we'll get right at it. I know that our colleagues in Northeast are all at the Northeast Fish and Wildlife Diversity Tech Committee meeting. I was down there this morning in Rhode Island, so I know they're anxious to view the recording later. So our first speaker is Adam Johnson. Adam is the Assistant Regional Director for Science Applications out on the West Coast. Adam's going to give an overview of how science application is supporting SWAP revision, and really appreciative of all that science application does in terms of providing support for landscape conservation, support to some of the regions, support on the SWAP prototype database or dashboard that's being developed. Just lots of ways that the science applications is helping out. So we're going to learn a little bit more about how science applications can help you with your revision or state wildlife action plan. And then our second speaker is Julie Henning. She's branch chief for conservation planning and policy for the National Wildlife Refuge System. And so she's the lead on the comprehensive conservation planning process at the service. So she's going to talk about how that planning process can potentially be linked to SWAPs and your work during revision. And finally, our last speaker is Brad Shoemaker. Brad's the chief recovery and conservation planning for Ecological Services, and Brad's going to talk to us about some ways maybe the recovery and conservation planning work that Ecological Service does can benefit all of you during your revision of your state wildlife action plan. After the presentations, if there's a little bit of time for Q&A, we'll try that, but feel free if there's a question on your mind to just pop that in the chat, and I'll ask our speakers when they're not presenting to try to answer those questions. And then we'll move into our breakout groups, and we have a couple of questions, trigger questions to help with that. And per usual, we'll kind of self-facilitate. I'll be in one of the breakout groups. I think Kiara will be in one of the breakout groups, so we'll kind of help facilitate those breakouts. But the other breakout groups, just if you would, just can facilitate, that would be awesome. And we'll post the questions in the chat before we go into breakout groups. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Adam.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. Again, I will, well, give me just a sec here, and I will share the screen. Let's see here. Mark, it says that host has disabled participant screen sharing at the moment.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
We'll try again.
There we go. That looks like a check mark. Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's share that. Okay. Hopefully you all are seeing me click through a PowerPoint presentation.
We're not in presenter. Now we are. Yeah. Perfect.
Excellent. Get back to the right slide. So again, good morning, everyone. As Mark said, my name is Adam Johnson. I'm the Assistant Regional Director for Science Applications in the Fish and Wildlife Services Region 8, which is California, the entire state of California, the entire state of Nevada, and then the Klamath Basin, which is largely in Northern California, but also includes a small portion of South Central Oregon. So, again, today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the way that we have been working with our state partners and try and touch a little bit on the specifics of SWAP. I may not go quite as broad as you all may be desirous of, but I'm happy to answer a few questions. I will apologize before we jump in. I am going to have to jump off. As you may be able to tell, I am in a hotel lobby at the moment, stepped out of a meeting that I'm in to give this presentation, but I will gladly follow up with any questions y'all might have in the longer term. So I just want to briefly touch on a little bit for those of y'all who may not be fully familiar with science applications, and forgive me if all of you are. I just want to speak a little bit about what science applications is. Our mission statement is to facilitate partnerships and address shared conservation challenges in a manner, trying to have an inclusive approach to conservation, fostering science excellence and integrity, and developing data decision support tools. And I think broadly, those are the manners in which we are approaching our role in supporting you all in SWAP revision to the degree that you are looking for that support. Over here on the right side of the screen here, you can see screenshots from a couple of data-driven products that we've put together here in Region 8. Both of these are from the top there is you can see sage grouse chick survival, and then below there is a product that we're working on with NDOW on Nevada wildlife corridors. So this approach is pretty unique to science applications, and what we bring that other partners within the Fish and Wildlife Service, other programs within the Fish and Wildlife Service may not, is great flexibility to be able to work outside of statutory limitations such as the ESA or the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, to be able to work with you all where you need that support. Scalability, the ability to take our products and meet the scale that you need, whether it's species specific, landscape scale, biome scale. Versatility, which allows us to really focus on your most pressing challenges. We really want to identify the challenges and priorities that are important to our partners at the state Fish and Wildlife agencies and other key partners, and really meet you there and find ways for the Fish and Wildlife Service to support you. And anticipatory. We are very forward-looking in science applications. A lot of our charge is looking at things like climate change, at-risk species, the sorts of issues that look out into the future, while also focusing again on the priorities that are facing us right now. So I think that this is a really strong and as I said at the top here, unique role that science applications can play in our ability to work with you all on the SWAP work. Just very briefly give you an overview of kind of who we are out here in Region 8. Most of our science applications teams across the country are small but mighty. And we've got folks who are working in disciplines as diverse as social sciences. Lauren Miller is our social scientist. We have data managers and GIS data product specialists such as Chelsea Sink and Philip Street. We have folks who are really focused on funding opportunities, like Matt Bond working in the Klamath and pulling together things there. We also have a pollinator, a Western monarch lead in Melissa Burns, amongst others in our group. So we're a really diverse set of skills in a relatively small team. So this is a model for how we view our approach in Region 8, and it's largely shared, well, not largely shared, it is shared across all of the other regions in the country. So what we're trying to do is at the regional level, take the priorities of our regional leadership in the Fish and Wildlife Service, the priorities of the science applications program nationally, the priorities of our partners at in the state Fish and Wildlife agencies, and find those places where they overlap and most effectively manifest those through help in putting these products, these conservation products and these conservation actions on the ground. One of the things that is most key in what science applications does across the country and in Region 8 is providing technical support. This is a place where we, our name is Science Applications for a reason. We are doing a lot of technical, science-driven, data-driven support. And what we're looking to do is build fair data-driven decision support tools. FAIR being an acronym for findable, accessible, reproducible, and I'm forgetting the I off the top of my head. I can't see my notes. I'm on my laptop, but y'all may be familiar with that that acronym as well. Some of the examples of what we're doing in Region 8 are our work with the Great Basin Bird Observatory to evaluate avian community response to landscape scale treatments. We are also coordinating with Oregon State University and the Forest Service to leverage data on Fisher for multiple projects across California to inform wildfire management. We're doing cross-programmatic support for the Ecological Services Program, specifically working with some at-risk or, listed species such as least Bell's vireo and greater sage grouse. And again, these are Region 8 specific examples, but there are region specific examples of this type of science applications technical support across the country. And I'm going to speak a little bit about some of our specific programs here in Region 8. In the Klamath Basin, we are working very hard to make sure that we are including a broad swath of partners. For those of y'all who may not be familiar with the Klamath Basin, it is a relatively small yet pernicious conservation challenge that gets a lot of national attention, very much water conservation and management driven, a lot of overlap with agricultural communities and tribal communities. And so there's a great deal of needing to do outreach and build partnerships. We have worked with this diverse group to develop what's called the Integrated Fisheries Restoration and Monitoring Plan. And essentially, we brought all of these stakeholders together, including the states of Oregon and California, and said, okay, we're going to work across the Klamath Basin and determine what we need to do to recover fisheries. This is really, really key at the moment. As many of you all are probably aware, we are on the cusp of the largest dam removal effort in U.S. history, with the removal of 4 dams in the Klamath River. And that should be realized in the next year. And then the hard work really starts, even though it took us 20 years to get to this dam removal. We're also deeply involved in a funding strategy. There are federal funds coming into the basin. And in fact, the meeting that I'm in currently is continued conversation with tribal, state, federal, local irrigation partners on how we can best leverage those funds moving forward to put conservation on the ground. California is a unique opportunity as well, in that in many ways, it has become kind of this national laboratory for what can be done in conservation, and highlights a lot of this the crossroads of challenges that have arisen in the Western U.S., in particular around water management issues, climate change and drought, a great number of threatened and endangered species, a lot of at-risk species, a number of a great deal of tribal entities as well, and then very large urban areas. So it's a really interesting challenge. Our program has been helping to coordinate the Federal America the Beautiful and the California 30 by 30 initiatives. So we've been working alongside very closely our partners in the state of California on that. Working with the National Alliance of Forest Owners Wildlife Conservation Initiative, and conducting surveys for at-risk species on private working forests. We are also working on Clear Lake Hitch, and looking at spawning and nursery habitat, modeling California spotted owl habitat, and providing science support for foothill yellow-legged frog reintroduction and translocation. So here again, just some examples of kind of the diverse ways in which we are providing both coordination and science support. another real key piece in the Western US and really key for us in California and our work with the groups that you see here on the right side of your screen is fuels monitoring work. And so, we are providing data products and data management to help these groups in their identification and monitoring of where these fuel reduction projects should happen, tracking what the impacts are to species, creating new science, creating new paradigms and setting precedents, and providing that strong coordination aspect. We are also deeply involved in Western monarch and general pollinator conservation and habitat restoration and creation. We do have the lead for Western monarch, but obviously Western monarch is something that moves across the West Coast and the Western U.S. We take this coordination really, really seriously. It's going to be really, really key to work closely with the states and identify the priorities for you all as well through the swaps to continue this work. This is all part, obviously, of a larger national effort on monarch and pollinator conservation, which I think is going to be really key for many of you all on this call and the agencies for which you work. Turning to Nevada, we are spending a lot of time in Nevada working with the state on species of greatest conservation need. And we are increasing our capacity and essentially trying to be a force multiplier to help the state identify priorities and grow capacity there. We're continuing to participate with a WAFL-wide discussion on these SGCNs, species such as greater sage grouse, Lahontan cutthroat trout, pinyon jay, tui chub, all things that the state has identified as important species, and we're working closely alongside them. And then, as I mentioned before, we are providing geospatial support capacity for NDOW across those programs. And so here again, these are all just examples of what we're doing here in Region 8, but demonstrate some of the types of work that Science Applications can engage in alongside you all, our state partners, as you continue to work through your swaps. And that is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to field any questions, Mark, if we have time for those right now. And I will obviously gladly answer any questions as follow-up if y'all have them. Happy to share my email address, all those sorts of good things.
Great. Thank you, Adam, for that. We can take one quick question, and then we want to move on to Julie. Anybody have a question?
I have a quick question, Mark.
Go ahead, Kim.
I was just curious. So we recently got the approval from our director's office to add pollinators to our swap in Montana, which is really exciting for us. I was just curious if there's capacity that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife can help with in other states like Montana to kind of start working on pollinators.
Yeah, absolutely. So the service, we've stood up, we have a national pollinator conservation program that Science Applications oversees. But again, it is nationwide. Nicole Alt oversees that. She was recently named the director of that. And yes, we do have capacity, Kim, and I'd be happy to hook you up with the right folks to discuss where we can engage with you all on that. But yes, that's exactly what the Pollinator Center was created for.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll follow up on that.
Excellent.
Thank you for the question, Kim, and thanks for that answer, Adam. And so if there's other questions you have for Adam, feel free to put them in the chat, or we can follow up later. But really appreciate you taking time out of your meeting today to talk to us about the work that you're involved in. Julie, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. Hi, thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Can you see me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Good.
So thank you very much for inviting me to your meeting. I am Julie Henning. I'm the branch chief for conservation, planning, and policy for the National Wildlife Refuge System. And I am based out of Washington, D.C. And what Mark mentioned, I do a lot of policy work, and we're updating a lot of our policies. And in particular, we are updating our planning policies, including the comprehensive conservation plans. And so today I'd really just like to share with you a little bit about what they are, where we're trying to go with planning into the future of the refuge system. And I will say that I've been with the refuge system for about I've been with Fish and Wildlife Service for 7 years, refuge system for 4. Before that, I was with Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife, where I worked there for 14 years. So I have some understanding about, what you all are doing. I actually have had the opportunity to write a SWAP, probably an early stage 1. I know that you guys have come a long way with planning and how you're thinking about SWAPs. And so today I just want to present what we're doing with the refuge system. So maybe I think there's definitely opportunity to collaborate and work together, especially as we're thinking about landscape conservation and where our lands can complement each other. So with that, I have about 15 slides to share with you about what we're doing on the policy front. So I'm going to share my screen.
I can see it, and I think if you just click on that button down below, you can put it in presenter mode.
Presenter mode. Let's do that.
It's the one at the bottom. It looks like a little monitor, sort of, like down in the tray at the bottom of the PowerPoint. Like, you see where it says note. Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Okay. Are you looking at the full screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay,
Yep.
great. Okay. So, like I mentioned, we're really in the refuge system, we're really transitioning to modernize our conservation planning efforts. And we're doing that through updating our policies. A lot of our policies were written over about 25 years ago, and they just need to be updated. And I'll talk about how they're being updated today. So these policies, when we think about planning, have real impacts to the nation and to the refuge system. We have over 90 million acres of refuge lands. We have about 610 refuge units that require a comprehensive conservation plan. These are just a couple of the few of the policies, but these are really the suite of our planning policies. And so today, we'll talk about land acquisition planning, comprehensive conservation planning process, step down plans, and particularly our habitat management step down plan. And before I get into that, I really want to highlight the National Wildlife Refuge System Improvement Act, and that was passed by Congress in 1997. And that really is important statute for our policies and how we manage the refuge system. It really provides a mission as well as overall guidance on our management and what we can actually do on refuges. And in particular, the Improvement Act requires that the refuge system have a comprehensive conservation plan for each refuge, and that comprehensive conservation plan must be updated every 15 years or as necessary. Some key provisions also of the Improvement Act, besides the comprehensive conservation plan requirement, is things like our compatibility requirement, which is basically requires us to, when there's an ask of something on our lands, it has to be compatible with the mission, and a full analysis is done in order to approve that action. Here, also, the Improvement Act states that we will work with states, that we will consult with adjoining state, local, federal, private lands affected conservation agencies when we're doing comprehensive conservation plans. And I really like to always put this slide up and you all know this because you are involved in swaps, is that planning is so critical for land management. It really allows, from the refuge standpoint, it really allows us to improve our community involvement. It strengthens our partnerships. It provides an understanding on what we're doing on the refuge and why, and obtaining input. And it really just overall improves the community support for the refuge. Also, when we talk about comprehensive conservation plans, we have 610 units that are required to have those plans. We have 539 that actually have a CCP. We have about 70 units that don't have a CCP. And I'm excited to be here today because there's really an opportunity moving forward for us to collaborate, in that the refuge system is currently in a state where we need to be revising a lot of our plans. They're more than 15 years old. And so we have an opportunity to make some changes on how we manage individual refuges. And so now I'm going to get into the policies. Really, the policies that we're updating are really sort of internal for how we manage the system. The policies are high level. They're really about the why, the who, the what. And they really don't get into a lot of the implementation of the policies. We do that in handbooks or guidance documents to provide consistency across the nation on our policies. The objectives of our planning policy revisions were really about I'll just say incorporating the landscape context into our work that we're doing. And how I think about this is not only really understanding our partners' vision and goals across the landscape, and incorporating that where we can into the refuge land management, but also thinking about it outwardly, which is how is the refuge management affecting our neighbors and others. So it's really twofold. Also, these revisions really ensure that climate is considered, that our actions are affecting and influencing and making us more resilient for climate change. The policies really emphasize meaningful community engagement, and our capacity, just like yours, is really limited on the planning side. We really don't have a lot of planners, and we have a lot of planning that we need to do. And so these policies also provide for more efficiencies to streamline some of our processes. So getting into a little bit more detail, when I talk about bringing in the landscape, it's really about trying to incorporate the landscape conservation goals into the work. And this slide just really represents that we're trying to, in the future, move towards CCPs being a much higher, less detailed planning document, really with the focus around vision and goals. And then we have something called step down plans, which are supporting the overall CCP. And those will have more the smart objectives and strategies. So I just want to say that, you know, again, that these policies really are encouraging a higher level document with the detail and the step down plans. Our land protection planning policy really is about, it's about what it really is about is we have refuge boundaries, and if we want to acquire or protect some acreage outside of that boundary, this is the mechanism to do that. And so it's really about bringing in landscape planning and design or swaps, finding those areas that are the most important from a conservation standpoint, and it helps with prioritization. And then our planning process for being able to accept or acquire land. Our next policy is comprehensive conservation planning. And like I've kind of mentioned, it really sets the long-term vision to achieve shared goals, identifying the landscape level plans. And in this policy, we haven't identified what landscape level plans are. It's really about wanting to be as broad as possible to include all types of plans that are more at the landscape level. So swaps are definitely part of this. Landscape conservation designs are part of this. Maybe waterfowl management plans are part of this. But in this policy, we just kept that term very broad. Also, we're encouraging refuges to combine multiple refuges under one CCP. And this is really a change in how we've done business in the past, but it really is about encouraging that landscape level planning by, if you have multiple refuges in a watershed or in that maybe have specific or similar goals, missions, that it might make sense to be combining them under one planning document. The next policy that I want to highlight is our step down planning policy. And a step down plan really is a more detailed plan that fits and nests underneath a CCP. And that plan really has the actions that the refuge is going to take to meet the vision and goals for that refuge. Step down plans can include visitor services plans. They can include habitat management plans, ecosystem plans, that sort of thing. But it's really the details of the actions that are going to occur on the refuge. And NEPA is part of that, is developing scenarios, providing, getting public input, and that sort of thing. I do want to highlight the habitat and species step down plan. This is really a plan that could be species specific, it could be habitat specific, it could be ecosystem specific. And it really, again, steps down to support the CCP. We want the landscape approach that is in the CCP to also be in the step down plan. And we're really encouraging refuge managers to focus on the priorities, that we can plan to plan, but we need to be planning to do, right? So with limited resources, definitely we're encouraging to plan where our priorities are. So for timelines, this is really good timing that I'm getting in front of you today. These policies that I'm talking about in this presentation are currently in the Federal Register. So love to get your input. If you know, they're in there for about 20 more days. And we've been working with AFWA and a subset of states where we coordinated early, and they provided really measurable, important information, and that we incorporated into the draft that was published in the Federal Register. Additionally, we also are working on a handbook toolbox, which is basically an internal document for people revising CCPs, developing new CCPs, that really provides templates and tools to provide some assistance. And we hope to have that rolled out just after the planning policies are completed. So that concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, are there any questions for Julie?
I got one. Hi. Thank you, Julie. So do you see a lot of examples where states are working on refuges, like at specific projects focused on SGCN?
So to tell you the truth, are you guys still seeing my screen? Because I'm trying not to share.
Still seeing it.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So really good question. To tell you the truth, we haven't been doing a lot of comprehensive conservation plans in the last like 6 years. We've been really focusing our planning efforts on hunting and fishing. It was a really strong administration priority. And our planning budgets were cut back in probably 10 years ago down to almost zero. And so we are just starting to build up our planning capacity again in each of our regions. And, you know, as I mentioned, some of the numbers, we're really behind on our CCP revisions. So it's a really good time, I think, for us to begin coordinating together as we're picking back up on CCPs.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Brett. Yeah. Well, and this is something we can toss around more in the breakout groups too. And I just think it's a great opportunity where CCPs can borrow from SWAPs and SWAPs can borrow from CCPs. I think there's a real opportunity to, use each other's planning efforts to the betterment of biodiversity in your respective states. So I'm really excited about the new planning policy and looking forward to continue working with you, Julie, as we go forward. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Brad.
All right. Afternoon, everybody. I'm going to get my screen set up here for just a second. I think it's this one. You seeing the full screen version of things?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So my name is Brad Shoemaker. I am the relatively new branch chief of recovery and conservation planning with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service under Ecological Services, which is the counterpart to the National Wildlife Refuge System. And we're going to talk today a little bit about the recovery process, its authorities, where that can tie in with swaps, and sort of let you guys piggyback off of those efforts. So why don't we hop on in and we'll get going. So we're going to start with the process overview for our recovery plan, sort of three-part framework and what we do. But the piece I want to talk about here is that so state wildlife action plans serve as the blueprints for conserving fish and wildlife and preventing endangered species within each state, right? That's without regard for ecosystem boundaries or sort of ecological boundaries or species boundaries. States have to submit these to Fish and Wildlife Service, and then you're eligible for grant funding, which is great. Actually, we're going to talk about grant funding in just a couple of slides. But one of the things here is each of the plan has addressed 8 required elements laid out by Congress and must identify and be focused on areas of species in greatest need of conservation within your state. It also addresses the full array of wildlife and wildlife-related issues that you're going to manage within your state. That is intrinsically different than our recovery plans. Our recovery plans and species status assessments are usually very specific to individual species. Occasionally, we will do multi-species recovery plans. That's common in places like Hawaii, and we would do all the avian birds under one plan. But generally speaking, you're going to get individual species specific information, which is very different from your swap. Now, that said, you can compile these together, sort of take the individual species range or ecosystems that they're operating in, pull out what's applicable to you, and then build off of those. The 8 components of these plan, similar to our recovery plan, the process shown on the slide, blends these different sort of what are Fish and Wildlife Service recovery plans into a single state action plan that you guys can then go work off of. Sorry, I had to pop up. So recovery plans, when you're building your swap, can offer straight upfront sort of Fish and Wildlife Service vetted information on the current species status, expectations for population in the near term, identified quantifiable actions, metrics for recovery, addressing root causes of what the species issues are, whether that be habitat loss, fragmentation, illegal collection, wildlife trade, climate change, or other potential impacts. And you guys can sift through those, take out the pieces that are applicable within your jurisdictional area, and then essentially plug and play into a lot of your swaps. From there, I want to talk a little bit about authorities here for a moment. So we're gonna go way back. The Endangered Species foundational document for all of these programs and the basis for scientific management of species, habitat, and ecosystems. Not just at the federal level, but it requires a lot of states as well, right? So Section 4, the recovery plan and status reviews are very similar to swaps in that, you know, they're looking at the root cause, they're looking at current status of the species, and you can grab that information from here and vet it with your agency, look at what actions you can take on your ground, and then put it in your own swap. Now, not everything is going to apply. You may have different boundaries. You may want to work with your neighboring state. This is a good foundational document for you both sort of to start at and then work from there. But really what I would say is you want to picture your swap as a consolidated recovery plan for all the species within that area. So you're taking all the individual Fish and Wildlife Service documents and you can consolidate them into what applies within your jurisdictional area. When we do our swaps, we do want to talk about sort of what changes we've had and how we do stakeholder and partner engagement. And the big question that we want to start with is how can ecological services support states in revision of their state wildlife action plans, right? And the old model of thinking and planning on this was that when we had a species and we wanted to recover it in a place, we would get very formal and we would have like a regional director appoint a specific team or a working group. And we're moving away from that right now. There was significant administrative time loss associated with being so formal, essentially speaking. For SSAs, and more importantly for recovery teams, the current Fish and Wildlife Service model is small, strategic, with established timeframes to actually sort of get down the road, make some decisions, and get to the implementation stage. Additional options for doing this, if we don't want to go through that whole process of sort of the reoccurring meeting, is to just pack it all into a few days, host a workshop or a working group, and put all that discussion and decision making into a much shorter timeline. It's very focused. It's a little more difficult to do, and there is some follow-up, but the benefit there is you can shorten what is a multi-month process, year and a half process, into a much, much shorter timeline. And our goal is to get you guys in the implementation work on the ground, sort of past that planning stage, to actually be taking some conservation actions. With metrics and actions defined in those recovery plans, when you were going to do one of these working groups, it's a great place to start and then develop, your SWAP, or you can engage and be developing the SSA or the recovery plan themselves. Authorities on these we're going to cover in the next slide. So once we move down this, how do we actually get to putting actions on the ground, right? So sections 10, 6, and 7 of the Endangered Species Act are the core tools used for recovery. Section 10, conservation plans, that's habitat conservations, conservation benefit agreements, and sort of what I would consider the most important one, the Section 10J, sort of reintroducing a species and the ability to manage it once it's there. Section 6 is where we have authorities to cooperate with states, and very important for you guys, to issue grant funding. And Section 7, which is less applicable, where we consult with other federal agencies on their projects and associated impacts. So through these tools, we can greatly increase management options for states. And while they're separate agreements, it's like step-down guidance. You get policy and you get step-down guidance in handbooks. This is sort of the opposite process, where you get these foundational documents and species assessments and recovery plans and SWAPs, and then you actually get to, your grant application and exactly the actions you're going to take and funding associated with it, and you get out the door to go do something on the ground. So while these are separate agreements and it's a little bit of time to build on each one of these, the actions can build off the foundation laid in the recovery planning and the SWAPs to allow greater management by the states. And the example that I'd like to use today is actually in process, but coming around the corner, is Colorado wolf reintroduction, right? So this is a state-led reintroduction of gray wolf in Colorado. But the piece that Fish and Wildlife Service can do is we can issue a 10J rule that allows for greater management flexibility once the state has actually gone through and done their reintroduction. So we can write up a plan, issue a rule that then gives the state much more authority to go out and physically manage their populations of the action that they're going to take already. I hope that sort of touched on all the different ways that these things tier off of each other and really rely on each other, and build into the actions that we need. I've got a little bit of time for questions, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that, Brad. Any questions? And Brad, I would say,
Okay.
since all of the federally threatened and endangered species are very likely to be species of greatest conservation need, I think the recovery plans are just a rich source of information for statewide action plans. And I don't know if anybody on the call today can maybe in just a few minutes, tell us about your experience of using recovery plans in your swap. Is there anybody that's online that's done a swap before that can speak to that?
Well, I just can say in our process right now, we've had service biologists in our meetings, and they have had their recovery plans with them, and we just like said, okay, take that action and stick it in our swap. So it's like a ready-made conservation action that's already been thought through. And I think the converse is also true, that as we are identifying conservation actions and information needs for these species, those things can feed into recovery plans and objectives as well and inform those. So I think it's really a right on approach that keeps us from duplicating efforts and trying to get all the partners working on the recovery actions instead of just one agency responsible for them.
Yep. And so I would build a little bit off of that comment and say, one of the real objectives a lot of times in state agencies is, or I have a background working with DoD a little bit, is, how do we recover this species, get it off the list, sort of get the restrictions off of local community, the local economy, and give management back to the state, right? So those recovery plans outline very quantifiable, data-driven numbers of what constitutes this species being recovered. You need this many populations in this number of geographic areas that have reproduced, for so many generations with the stable population of this. It gives you guys these very specific things where if you want to go that route, dedicate some funding, get funding from the state or anything, you can say, these are the things that we need to be managing for. These are the root causes of what's stressing these species. And here's how we would implement recovery actions in order to get to these metrics, consider this recovered. And my ultimate goal is always to get something off the endangered species list and have it actually be a recovered species.
Well, thank you for that question, Brett, and thank you for that great answer, Brad. Lots of collaboration potential there. So I'm going to paste the questions into the chat, and for some reason it looks pretty small on my screen. I don't know why that is, but Kira has them and I have them. I think we'll just go with 2 breakout groups, and she can facilitate one, I'll facilitate the other, and do a little bit of a deeper dive. And our speakers are welcome, presenters are welcome to go into breakout groups if you'd like, and if you can't understand that too. But yeah, I really appreciate our speakers, and we'll be in touch if there's follow-up questions. But I think there's great opportunities for the service in the states to collaborate on these wildlife action plans, which are of increasing importance as we try to address the biodiversity crisis that's happening in this country and beyond. So again, thank you for that work. So I'm going to just take a minute here and put us into our breakout rooms and make sure that Kira and I are in separate rooms. And then we'll have about 20 minutes we can spend in breakout. Kira, I think you're in room 2, Kira. So I'm going to open the breakout rooms and I'll go into number 1.
Looks like we're the only ones left.
Looks like it. Well, it may be that the swap meeting has ended, so let me check the schedule. Yeah, we reconvene at 3:20, so it should be
now.
that we wrap up and adjourn in these next 10 minutes, but
Oh, so
Mm.
they're still in their group, you think?
perhaps I'm gonna message someone. Hmm. I can only message you two. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I was anticipating we needed to come back at this time.
Yeah, same. I thought you said 20 minutes.
It seems like we must still be in the breakout room.
We would have from 2:50 to 3:20. Even so, I mean, we're on time.
Yeah.
Would you two like to just wait here, or because I can't message anyone outside of our breakout room at this time?
I'm fine with just keeping this running in the background while I. If I hear chatter, I'll jump back in.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Well,
sounds good. Cool.
Right. Hi, my team, we got here a little early, so we were just gonna wait, but it looks like they're back, Brent and Kristen.
Okay, good deal.
Hi.
Hey, John. Cantor,
Yes, sir.
did you catch any more hawks yesterday? Or
Not a one. Like late in the evening, a couple of turkey vultures going to roost came over me. So I looked on one of the sites. I missed. It looks like a big broadwing day was last weekend. So
I missed them too. I was at our botanical gardens last night, and this lady told me she had just seen 30 broadwings kettling over this power line cut. It's like, always a little late, and broke my neck, strained my neck trying to find those warblers too to know.
yeah. And I'm hurting up here from like I helped a friend put in some wood duck boxes on his property the other day, and those post pounders, man, that warbler neck and trying to watch for hawks. I need a massage.
Sorry, Mark. We digressed.
No, that's all right. Just maybe in our last couple of minutes, does anybody want to share any observations or maybe next steps that we could take at AFWA to help make, further these connections, collaborations between Fish and Wildlife Service and the states related to SWAP revision? Anybody have any suggestions?
I think this is kind of on your radar, Mark, but yeah, just the contacts would be super helpful. And then the pollinator contact as well. And then Christina mentioned examples of how they could help in our region. I think those are the kind of 3 things that would be really helpful for Montana.
And I can just follow up with you with the Monarch Pollinator Center lead after the call.
Okay, great.
All right. Let's get my notes here. Kara, did you have anything you want to share from your group?
Well, I took some notes on some of the ways that my group members mentioned wanting to grow their capacities and interact with other departments. So we see that in Minnesota, there's more of a desire to work with the Department of Transportation on a federal level. And the main barrier to that is limited capacity to make these relationships happen and to do the strategy. And I know that in Georgia, there's more of a desire to work with the Environmental Protection Agency to support water quality projects and to also work more with the United States Geological Survey. So that's what I got with my group in terms of ways we could, the wish list.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. Okay. Well, thanks everyone. I really appreciate you dialing in today. And, I think the Fish and Wildlife Service is really here to support and help you. I think in the past, it's been a little bit more like Whisper, they've been the supporters. And I think through some outreach that Elsa and Hobolt and others have been doing, I think they're really trying to get, more folks within the service aware of SWAP and interested in helping states make their SWAPs as good as they can be. So I think we're seeing a little turn in the tide here. So let's take advantage of that and we'll follow up with a couple of action items. Very good. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Mark, as always.
Okay. Bye-bye. Kara, you're on mute.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for noticing.
Yeah.
I wanted to just reach out to you after this recording, just so I could look at the video and make sure I fill in any gaps in my notes so that they're robust for Jason.
Okay.